Well, hello, everyone. Good day, good morning, good night, wherever you are on the planet or not on the planet, for that matter. And this is Spiritual Tech Talks 2.0 Summit. And we're wrapping up the first season, but we're finishing strong because we have Marco Morelli with us today. And this is Doug Prater. You guys know him from a few other interviews, and he is our, I don't know, just our producer and information guy at IAWAKE and Integral Recovery, and he's just an amazing guy. So he's here with us too. And Marco, let me just say we have a history. So we know each other really well. Marco's really an amazing guy. I'm looking at your little bio here, and it didn't name the third of it or the fourth of it, but I've known you for about 10 years now, and he was working with Ken Wilber for about 5 years in Boulder. Three. Well, it probably felt in dog years or something. Anyway, I'm sure it was in 10. So 3 years. And I'm not sure how we met. Oh, I know how we met. I was doing the first Integral Recovery group here, and we sent out, through the Integral grapevine, I needed some help and support, and Marco showed up. And it was an amazing experience. We were just doing it for the first time, and we were all working together. And, us who were the staff were working on our issues too. And I just remember the intensities and the seriousness that you were meditating. And then he ended up helping me edit and put together some of my first writings about integral recovery. And we've been working together for years, with websites and different projects that we've been going on. So there's been a lot of contact, and it's been great to see you. And now you're doing this Cosmos Cooperative, was like this absolutely gorgeous website we'll get into. But let me read this little bio just to give everybody an idea what you've been doing. It's just Marco V, as in Victor Morelli, is the founder and CCO of Cosmos Cooperative and creative director of Metapsychosis. He studied, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. You said it right.
All right. It's going to get interesting. He studied philosophy and comparative literature at Binghamton University and worked for Ken Wilber's Integral Institute from 2003 to 2007 before leaving to follow the pathways of art. He is the author of Rubens Orphans, Anthology of Contemporary Nicaraguan Poetry, Translations, and Mirror in Love poems, and is currently at work on a new book of poems, stories, and essays titled I Am the Singularity. He's also co-author of a really important volume, Integral Life Practice, that he wrote with Ken Wilber, Terry Patton, and Adam Leonard. And that's a really important book. And you were there, and you were part of that. So, hi, Marco.
Hi. Well,
did I miss anything?
Back to that moment. No, that was beautiful.
Okay.
And a summary for what it's worth as a bio. It's actually not a bad summary of where I've come to over these last 10 years since we first met. It was actually almost exactly 10 years ago, around this time of year. And the context of that meeting in my life is that I had been working with Ken Wilber at Integral Institute during this pretty, intense and very creative startup phase, where a lot of people were coming to Boulder, Colorado and getting involved. And there were all kinds of experiments going on. It was sort of Ken's coming out from being a more reclusive type of philosopher and writer to working with people and engendering many projects. So a lot came out of that. But my 3 years there were ending at the time that you and I met. I had just left. The organization was going through a number of changes, which I write about actually in an article on Metapsychosis. It's a journal of consciousness, literature, and art. And I wrote a piece called Integral in Me, a brief, true but partial history of my years as a meta-revolutionary, something like that.
Awesome.
And anyway, that time in my life was pretty difficult, actually, because I had just burned myself out working for this, brilliant startup. And I was looking for a new direction in life. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do next. I just knew that I had to follow a calling. I knew that I had to follow a path. And when that call went out, when you put out that email looking for somebody to help with integral recovery, it seemed like something that would be of mutual benefit, right? Because I could go and do my own like recovery, my own
Absolutely.
meditation retreat. I wasn't like I didn't have a substance addiction, but I had other things going on in me, as you well knew, learned.
Absolutely.
And so it was an opportunity for me to spend a extended, intensive duration of time doing a practice with you and with the small community that we brought together, that you brought together in that space, and which you did subsequently over a number of other occasions, and which you have evolved into, what is the incarnation of integral recovery now. But it was a profound time for me because it let me kind of deepen into my own experience, connect with others who were struggling in their own ways, and to come out of it with some clarity about what I would do next. Now, that clarity was partial. And, it took many years to come to some synthesis of what I had learned working with Ken Wilber and at the Institute, and through all the people that I met, through the experiences that I had there, and to determine like what I could do with it and what I could do new. And of course, in that time, 10 years, other things happened. I got married. Well, I got married just before that started. We've had 2 daughters, 2 dogs. And, I've gone from being a kind of somebody on the, in my late 20s, early 30s to somebody being in my early 40s. And so it's a different place to be. And it's been a gestational process. And so I'll tell the story about kind of Cosmos and what that is and like where it really came from, but I don't want to just hold forth for too long. I'd like to have a conversation and just kind of hear like.
No, you're doing great. You're doing great.
All right. Yeah. So you want me to keep going?
Oh yeah. Well, let me just say a little bit about when Marco showed up. It was like this guy had been like working every day, with Ken Wilber for like 3 years, not just sitting at the feet of the master, but like producing and doing all kinds of stuff. And he's a good writer. And I was like intimidated. It's like, oh my God, here I am starting to teach integral for the first time. And I put on we had a lot of CDs or DVDs from the Integral Institute, and I put them on, the students' eyes would just cross, it's like, they just weren't ready to hear it. So I had to start teaching it myself. And I was kind of, I don't know, it's really, this guy's been with Ken. I said, Marco, am I doing okay? And he said, you're doing fine. You're doing fine. So that was nice. And also it was my first time I really had an integral brother, somebody who really understood what the hell I was talking about, not just from long distance or from books or from videos, because I was living still in Teesdale and you were, in the heart of it all, which is Boulder at the time. And that was really nice. And the students just adored you. They since your sincerity, your intelligence, you're working on your own stuff, and that's all I was. And integral recovery, everybody's work on your stuff. It's an ongoing lifetime. Nobody's gotten the good, housekeeping seal of approval where we don't have to keep going deeper and polishing our acts. So yeah. And I just want to say I looked at your this website you created. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's probably the most gorgeous website in the history of websites, and that's saying a lot. I mean, the ones I've seen, and I'm really interested in this artistic thing, because somehow in American culture, sometimes it just gets the last little thing on the docket is art and creativity somehow, and you've just like taken this on, and you are a poet and you are a creative, and so tell us a little with that kind of frame, or tell us a little bit about it and how the inspiration came and what are you doing?
Well, first, I think I think the way that we perceive each other is interesting, because and how like projections work and how relationships work. Because I felt like a total fuck up when I showed up in Utah. Like I didn't feel like an integral master or anything like that. And at that time, the other piece of the puzzle there was that I had been working on this book, Integral Life Practice, especially with Terry Patton and Adam Leonard, and Ken was like the meta author. So we were working almost like artisans, or what's that? Like like a guild or something like that, Anyway, and integral recovery was a fusion of the work that you've been doing in the recovery world with the integral framework, with this idea of practice, and this idea that a practice is a foundation for a path, right? And that the kinds of, and by practice, that means a lot of things. I mean, that means meditation could be a really important part of practice, but there are many different dimensions of practice, right? That was the idea of integral life practice, is that it's integrating different dimensions of our being through the intentionality that we that we embody those with. And so, you know, that was something that that I'd taken really seriously, and that even before I came to Integral Institute, I had a meditation practice, and I paid attention to my physical health. I tried to be healthier, and I, you know, I of course was imperfect in doing that. And I mean, one of the things that was difficult for me at Integral Institute is that the kind of pressure to bring something forth that was really new and innovative and like world changing, you know, that was the vision. It was a visionary project. I felt like I had to sacrifice my practice in some way, or like my practice degraded during that time. And I'm probably like going off the rails here a little bit. So
no, you go on whatever rail you want. It's fine.
I guess what I'm trying to say is that that practice has been an important component of my life, even though when I left, what I ultimately discovered is that I was less interested primarily in the framework or in the kind of theory, and I was more interested in what you could do creatively if you include not just theory but everything. So and what that means is like your actual life. It's like your actual experience, and that's where the art and the creativity come in. It actually goes pretty like, you know, deep for me. Like I really feel, I feel the weight of what I'm doing sometimes. And
say more about that. When you said the weight of what you're doing, it's like you have a karmic or dharmic responsibility to bring something into the world.
I don't know if I would put it in those terms exactly, because it's not that I'm so special, or that there's, you know, some kind of external force that, you know, wants me to bring something specific forth. I mean, it's more that like that what I've experienced art actually to be is a matter of, it's not just a consumer product, right? It's not just something that you download and you enjoy, and then, you know, maybe you talk about it or whatever, and then you let it go, and then it's on to the next thing. Like that to me is part of what's broken about our culture in general. And what art really means to me is it's a matter of life and death. It really comes from that place of life and death. The good art does anyway. Like the best art comes because you have to make it, not because it's just a nice thing to do. Now, I'm probably like really awesome artists like Picasso and so forth, they just like whip out masterpieces like, you know, brushing their teeth. It's not necessarily anything super special, you know, at that point. I think it, you know, like anything goes through a path. It's a spiritual path. But I experienced that call of art as an existential call, as something that I had to follow, even at the expense of, you know, many other things in my life and other possibilities. The one thing that's been important to me though is to have a sense of balance as well. I have a family, I have friends, I have a community. I don't look at art as something that's separate from the rest of life. It's not separate from all those, you know, that whole web of relationships, and it's not separate from what's going on in the wider world, what's actually happening, and what our response to it must be. Art is a response. That's you know, essentially what it is. You know, it's a way of it could be a way of many different things. It could be a way of crying out for help. It could be a way of trying to like wake somebody up or wake people up. It could be a way of, reconstituting a vision of what's even possible for us as people, for us as a human family, for us as a human species. I see the potential of art as illuminating that horizon of potentials and possibilities, and what it can do that more just kind of everyday discourse doesn't do that well is to like shock us awake, to shock us into a new way of seeing, a new way of feeling. And then out of that, in that kind of space that gets generated, then all different kinds of things can happen. Like then we can understand each other better, perhaps. Then we're more motivated to cooperate, to work together rather than to work at odds with each other. Then perhaps we're less likely to be manipulated by forces that are more interested in power and wealth than they are in human community. So I do feel a weight to what I'm doing, and I think it's in some ways a continuation or a reincarnation of the same weight that I think was present at Integral Institute at that time. Like there was a sense that we were doing something important, and that
it was important to me.
Yeah, and it was, and what I've witnessed over the past 10 years, like out of that initial euphoria of people finding each other and having all kinds of interesting creative ideas, and that the world has changed in that time. And one of the things that has really kind of come on the scene is what we call social media, and the kind of the virtualization of discourse, and I would say even the commercialization of discourse, insofar as so much of our communication is traversed through commercial networks, corporate networks that tend, to be dominant, that operate in ways that are sometimes shady, that are, I think demonstrably manipulative, extractive, exploitative, and we use them because they're convenient and because they let us get part of what we want, which is each other. Like we want to connect with each other, but there's a cost to doing that, and part of the cost is that we are feeding that beast. We're feeding a certain beast. We're reinforcing patterns and behaviors that actually are destructive, to who we are. think where we left off was that I had left Integral Institute and you were on the cusp of starting Integral Recovery. And we talked about how Integral Life Practice, which is this system or framework that that we gestated at Integral Institute, but really coming out of a lineage. You mentioned Murphy and Leonard. They had a thing called Integral Transformative Practice, and it's just a branding thing, you know. But the idea was that there are all these disciplines, these traditions of you can call them spiritual technologies. Michel Foucault, the French philosopher, called them technologies of the self, and he traced a different lineage going back to ancient Greece. But they're basically ways of working on yourself and of waking up, of dealing with your emotions, of channeling the life current, and of growing, right? So I had been doing that. And I think that where we left off also, I was talking about how, because I was such an intense, computer guy on trying to participate in this startup happening, Integral Institute, I kind of lost my center. Like I lost my practice. I practiced a lot less in those formal senses of doing meditation and exercise and the other formal practices that are so useful to keeping balance and keeping healthy. I did a lot less of that when I was at Integral Institute than I had been doing before I got there. And so I burned out, but it was also a learning experience. It was a very deep learning experience for me because it clarified what my life was really about, like what this incarnation was really about. And it wasn't about meta-theoretical philosophy. And it wasn't even, I would say, really about practice per se, because in the perspective that I came to, practice is a means to an end. It's not the thing that I wanted to spend my life just doing for the sake of doing it. So what was that end was the question, but it wasn't really a question because I already knew. And for me, I'm a poet. Like that's what I feel like I am. That's what I want to do. I mean, it's just like being gay or anything else. You discover who you are, and that is the result of, or the manifestation of, infinite conditions and whatever. We can go into the metaphysics of it, but basically, like, that's what I have to deal with, is this impulse or this desire to create beauty and to perceive beauty and to articulate it in words. But it's not an easy thing to be a poet in a capitalist society. I'll tell you.
Oh no, it's really not. Yeah.
And so that desire, that dream, had to collide with the economic and the social reality, which is that I had at that time just gotten married. We were well on the pathway to starting a family. We were, for lack of a better word, settling down. Like we bought a house, and so how could I bring those pieces together, the artistic side and the practical side, and for that matter, the spiritual side and the integral side of like practicing and
Sure.
wanting to basically have a good life. And so when I left, I thought I didn't have a very clear idea. I thought I'll make a living online somehow. Like I'll put my work out and people will support me. and in essence, that's still my idea, but it's had to kind of grow into something a little bit more sophisticated. And so I think, full disclosure, we should say that over the course of the last 10 years, how I've made money, how I've made my living has been as a web developer, a web designer, a copywriter, an editor, and a consultant on creative projects, website projects, in some way, marketing projects.
Yeah.
That's part of what our relationship is that I've helped create some of your websites, right?
Sure.
With my wife Kayla, who's a graphic designer, and she actually makes the things look pretty. Like I deal with other
you make them work.
Yeah, and she helps with that as well.
Yeah.
So but over those 10 years, I developed a kind of general set of skills. Like I'm not super great at any one thing, but I have enough of the different pieces that I could put something together. And then like the question was, well, what do I really want to do? And how do I really want to respond to the reality that I perceive, which we talked about a little bit as well, in terms of the modern world and what a lot of people experience as a crisis. And a lot of people experience that not just in external terms, but also in internal terms.
Yeah.
How do I want to respond to that? And how can I do that in a way that supports my passion as a writer, an artist, and a poet? And and that's how Cosmos Cooperative came about. Is that I just kept on, working away at that question, and it took me many years. It was very painful, and it was a difficult path for me. In terms of my personal life, my personal struggle, that's what it's been about, is how to resolve those questions. And I guess maybe I want to kind of transition to talk a bit about like how that idea really landed.
Yeah.
But I don't want to be too monological either. So I want to hear from you in terms of like.
Well, I'll just say that just talking to you, I was when I lived in the Bay Area, I was a singer-songwriter, which is a poet with a guitar, right? And I had a mentor, Alan Cohen, was really a well-known kind of. He helped start the first psychedelic newspaper in the country that came out of San Francisco, and the big gathering in the park. Anyway, he was really well known. He was a really good poet in the Bay Area. And I went back to San Francisco a few months back. We were at a conference, and we went into San Francisco. So I went to City Lights bookstore, which was where Kerouac and Ginsberg and all those cats were hanging and stuff. And I just got so nostalgic and almost started to cry being there. And I was like, did you remember when poetry really mattered to you in your life? Yeah. And I went away thinking just like, God damn, I don't want to lose that part of myself. And it really moves me when just to hear you talking about it. And, it's not a real, it's not an easy path to take, in America, unless you're like an academic, and you're a PhD and you teach poetry and your students have to buy your books or something like that. It's kind of hard to make it, but nevertheless, it's really important. And, essential. The soul of our country, the soul of our species is written by the poets. And if we lose that, we're really lost something essential. So yeah, I'm all here for you, and I'm into it. So don't feel comfortable
all right.
talking about it.
Well, yeah, well, that's I totally feel what you're saying, and I think sometimes it's hard to make that case because the focus, the predominant focus is how are we going to succeed? How are we going to make something work? Look, it's a pragmatic. Even the United States, we're a pragmatic country. We have a mythopoesis. We have a sense of history, a sense of story, a sense of tradition. That's certainly part of the American culture, and it's part of any culture. But part of that story involves part of that story involves like the sort of cutting off of those possibilities to really focus on what we can achieve. And so that's nothing wrong with that. Like that's just what it is. I think I don't want to talk about the politics of it right now and how that kind of shows up in various ways, but what I have felt the need to do, what I feel my like little pixel of contribution to whatever this larger emergence of what people are doing in the world, is to keep that current alive, to keep that flame alive of the beauty part of the equation. Because like an integral thinking, and this goes back to Plato, of course, but Ken Wilber resurrected it in some ways. You have the good, the true, and the beautiful. Yeah. And the good is ethics and morals and social life, and the true is science and reason and objective reality. But the beautiful is the dimension of like why that all matters, and like what makes that really brilliant, and what makes that what makes life worth living. And so what ended up happening, to continue with the story, is that I just got deeper and deeper into life as a freelancer and into a different kind of rat race of making a living, doing projects, getting bills paid, invoicing, all the things that go into running a small business. Except I never wanted to run a small business. I never particularly wanted to be a web developer or a web designer. It just happened because that was how I could make a living. Now, I was very fortunate because I had wonderful clients like yourself and others, a handful really, who sustained my family over the course of time and gave me some space to incubate an idea that I didn't even know I had when I first left, but it was there like a seed. And who also let me pick up a whole bunch of skills, and expose me to other ideas. For example, IAWAKE Technologies, we did the first website for your company, and you gave me free meditation tracks too. So I was able to get exposed to all the different tracks and different styles of entrainment technology that you have, and I've actually used that over the years. I used it this morning.
Me too.
Right. So it's been a part of my life, and I have a playlist on my phone of the different. I even kind of broke them into different folders where, depending on the particular use case, right? So there's all the brain catalyst, and they're more sort of stimulating and awakening, and then there's stuff like Deep Delta, which just puts you in a very spacious space, right? So
yeah, I just did that this morning, as a matter of fact.
So I'm a fan. I'm a user. I do also regular meditation, no headphones, naked meditation, and I kind of just swim between those two banks of the river, between just au natural and technology enhanced. But that's all been part of really the path of deepening, refining that sense of balance and center, and then figuring out what the hell I'm going to do. So yeah, thanks for that, by the way, because part of it was your passion for meditation, for practice, and for the technology. I was struggling to bring these pieces together. I was getting stuck in my writing. I was feeling like I just didn't have the time, the energy, the bandwidth to really dedicate myself to it. I had all these projects, had different clients going on. I was juggling different things. We had our family. And finally, I was like, I got to do something. Like, I just have to do something different, shake it up. And that was like out of sheer desperation, just angst and depression. And because I was doing the meditation, I was doing the exercise, I was doing all these things, I was doing all the right things, right? I was doing my ILP, but I still hadn't answered a core question. And that's like, what are you really, all that, what's it here to serve? What are you really doing it for? And so I'd been a member of some book clubs. There was a local book club of a bunch of guys. So it was a men's book club, and they got together and drank a bunch of beer and like talked about books. And it was cool. We had some really good conversations. But in that book club, somebody brought up this book by the novelist David Foster Wallace, and it's called Infinite Jest. And I'd known about that book. I knew it was this huge book. I have a copy over there. But it's like sort of an epic book. And I thought, man, I'd love to read a book like that and really just dive into this other world, like dive into this, this totally different way of expressing reality. And the guys didn't want to read it, they didn't want to commit to it because it's literally 1,000-page book.
Yeah, it's a fatty for sure.
Small type. They had to bump down the type so that it wouldn't be 1,500 pages. And then there are like 300 pages of footnotes in even smaller type. And the book is this just wild. It's almost like if somebody like vomited out, late 20th century American life, and like all of the absurdity of it, all of the horror of it, all of the pain of it, and made a work of art that didn't totally fit together, didn't like wrap up in some neat bow, but was fundamentally honest in some way. And I thought, I just want to read it. You know, I want to read it with people, like, because it's the kind of book that it's a different kind of book than just, you know, reading something and forgetting about it. It's an experience. So they didn't want to read it. That was cool. I was like, I'm just going to do it. And I used my, you know, webmaster and internet marketing, you know, ninja skills, and put up a web page, and said, you know, we're reading this summer. So I called it Summer of Jest. And I made up a little schedule. I made up a little, invitation, and I put a button there. I'm in, right? So people could join, and I put it out. And I shared it on social media, did Twitter, did Facebook, did the Google Plus, did the Goodreads, and people. Here's what happened: people started joining. Like, people came. Like, and I didn't even know. Almost everybody who participated and who ended up joining this book club, this summer book club to read Infinite Jest, were people I didn't know, which was great too, because, like, that was part of what I needed, is to get out of even the social circles that I kind of that I still found myself in some ways, found myself entrapped and entangled in, because as I think we were saying at the end of the last call, Integral Institute kind of fell apart, and it was reborn in another form as Integral Life, but there was sort of a diaspora.
Certainly was.
Yeah, in the community, and people just started doing a lot of different things. Social media became a big factor. So rather than having more kind of smaller dedicated communities for things, now you had Facebook and Twitter, and you're like literally on the same platform, you know, billions of other people. And so the whole nature of social relationships also changed, I think, over the last decade. And this kind of factored in because we did this book club, and we started just talking online, and it made it really easy. You know, like, I couldn't even keep up with people posting about the book, just doing their own, like, little takes on it, their philosophical riffs, the connections to pop culture. I mean, that particular book, Infinite Jest, was really, really, like, just perfect for that. And I'll just say one thing about it, that it's hard to describe the book, but one of the aspects of the book has to do with recovery, and it has to do with addiction. Part of the book takes place in a halfway house in Boston for recovering alcoholics and drug addicts, and part of what Wallace does as a novelist is take you inside of their lives, and he knew this from the inside out as well, because he struggled profoundly with his mental health, with substance abuse, and, you know, with his sensitivity to, you know, what he saw going on in the world and around him. He was a privileged person. You know, he had, his father was a professor of philosophy. His mother was also, you know, well educated. They had money. They had everything. He didn't have anything to complain about, but that was partly what he had to complain about. Like, that was partly his being was just responding to the madness of our world right now. He ended up committing suicide a few years before the book was published. Excuse me, really? before we read the book. Sorry, that was, I think, in 2008, and so it was still very close, and it was a very how do I put this? It wasn't just about the, you know, how the big words he could use or the sentences he could string together, because he could string together a sentence that goes on for pages. And he does. And then within that sentence are multiple references to footnotes in the end, and then some of the footnotes have footnotes. So there's this whole postmodern, you know, to play with language and with you know, his literary dexterity, but at the heart of it, he was struggling, and he told he told the stories of all these different characters who were struggling in their own way, in their own ways, with their own demons, in their own social circumstances, which were different from his own, very different, and and that was the beauty of it, is that you really could get inside, and that those characters became mirrors for aspects of yourself in your own life and your own relationships. And what was amazing that happened through this book club is that people began opening up. Like they began sharing about their their battles with depression or with addiction, or like, and how that mixed up with their intellect and with their relationships. I mean, I had people tell me that that it gave them an escape from a closed world that they were in, like a new mother or a retired person who was just sort of living in their apartment and didn't have something substantial to like connect with other people about. And now we had this book, and we could connect to each other as people, as real people, like just opening up, being honest about what's really going on with us. And then it was really funny. I mean, the book is really funny. I mean, he's a great artist. He tells good jokes. He plays with language in ways that are very delightful. And that's part of the jest part of it, the infinite jest. But it's a dark humor because the phrase infinite jest comes from Shakespeare. And so it was a great experience. And we had a Facebook group. We had Twitter. It was really noisy. A lot of people got involved. It was a lot of fun. It went deep. It was philosophical. It was quirky. It was just good, but it was a lot of work too. And just keeping up with the discussions. I did some podcasts at the time. That's when I started a podcast called Infinite Conversations, and it was a play on infinite jest. And I interviewed a couple of scholars. We did some hangouts. So we talked live. We did a couple of in-person events as well with folks that lived in Colorado. And I was like, this is the kind of thing that I could do. Like this, like people gave me good feedback too. Like they liked doing it. Like, and they liked me, like, helping make it happen. And so I got that sort of, yeah, I could do that. And if I could do that and sort of bring people together to go deeper and use literature and use art as vehicles for doing that, for deepening people's relationships with each other, and for like talking about things that matter, talking about like what's actually going on in the world, like what, how's that really affecting us? And what are we doing about it or not doing about it? Like there's something there. Like I felt like there was a potential there. And going from that point at the end of Summer of Jest, when I was like, this is something I want to keep doing, to how that actually turns into this cooperative organization called Cosmos. That's been the last 3 years. And basically it came because what it came out of is that the people that read this book, they were talented people. Like they were writers in their own right. They were poets and artists in their own right, or philosophers. And even if they weren't particularly identified as artists or intellectuals, they were interesting people who had interesting things to say. And I thought, well, if I can create a platform where those people can interact with each other and kind of support each other, but then also challenge each other, and then I could publish their work, and we can have conversations. We could read more books. We could work on bigger projects. Then that could be something really powerful. And as I thought about it more and did a lot of writing about it, a lot of soul searching about it, I realized that it wasn't something that I want. It was something that could only really work if everybody owned it, if everybody had some stake in it. Because if it's just my thing, then I don't think that will really evoke that full sense of participation, that full commitment over time that it really takes to go into spaces like that, to go deeper, like to do a deeper practice, to really get to the next level of your own development or your own path, your own journey. And so that's where the cooperative idea came out. And in the last 3 years, I've been slowly kind of developing it and trying things out and experimenting. And it started with Summer of Jest, and then that turned into an idea called a theory of everybody, kind of like a theory of everything, but it's a theory of everybody.
Yeah.
So it's just a play on that. And that was more conceptual, but I have some ideas for that. Then we started a journal, we started a book club called Lit Geeks, which is now defunct actually, just in that form, but it was sort of a way of continuing the Summer of Jest. And then we started a journal called Metapsychosis, and that was for a journal for consciousness, literature, and art, and for publishing original work. And the term and metapsychosis is an allusion to Infinite Jest, because there's a character. I won't give it away, but if you read the book Infinite Jest, you'll see where metapsychosis comes from. And then Cosmos came to be the container for it and the vehicle for it. Like, that's the organization, that's the legal entity that if you join Cosmos as a member, that you actually become an owner of it. So that's legal. Like, that's what a cooperative means, is that depending on how you structure it, the workers and or the consumers of, let's say, the product you're making, or the community are owning members. And the cooperative tradition has, various structures and practices for how to make that happen, how to make that work. So, I was part of a food co-op when I lived in Brooklyn, as in my early 20s, but I didn't have the business background to develop that. So I was struggling for quite some time, but still doing things and still kind of getting people involved and putting out material and having conversations and like doing what I actually wanted to do. But the business part of it really started to sink very, in the last few months, because I met a person who had a similar sort of their own version of my story, but who also happens to be a co-op developer, and her name is Caroline Savory. And so we've become this kind of nexus, this sort of creative executive nexus, to help shape the structure and the practices and the business of Cosmos. And that's what we're launching now, which is the website that you've seen, and the forum that's associated with it. Now that we have a forum and that's at infiniteconversations.com. And people have been trickling in, and we've been having conversations. We're doing a couple. One of the first things we're doing now is we roll out membership or a couple of book groups, so we're going to be reading two books to start. One is a work of philosophy by a German philosopher named Peter Sloterdijk. He's living, and he wrote this 3-volume exploration of the ways in which we construct spaces in our lives, and how that has emerged in the course of Western history, especially from he calls it spheres. And so we have our sort of microspheres of being in relation with each other right now, right? Like, we're a kind of sphere of communication, but then we have our larger social spheres, and we have this sort of global sphere. And it's, anyway, I don't want to get too far into the description of the book, but we're going to do a group reading with that. And I'm working with a cultural scholar, John David Ebert, who's read all the books already. I have not read the books, but he's read them all. He's done YouTube videos on them. He's written a number of his own books exploring contemporary philosophy and histories of civilization and media. So we're launching that in mid-April. And then we're also going to be reading a book called Shantaram. And this is a novel by a fellow named Gregory David Roberts. And I'm working with a fellow named David Guyon, who proposed reading this book. And I said, hey, you want to read a book? I have a platform for reading books and forming communities around that. And so we've been collaborating on putting together a reading group for that as well. And the idea is that on this platform, you'll be able to join and bring your own ideas, bring the books that you want to read, and find other people to read with you. And we have the forum space that is more of a just dedicated space for that. There isn't a lot of the social media noise. There isn't any advertising, nothing like that. It's just really dedicated to going deeper and to having good conversations.
Now, do you have your poetry on there? Do other people have their art and the different things that?
Yeah, so I've published some stuff on Metapsychosis.com. We've published a bunch of other poetry, fiction, essays, philosophy, artwork. That's on Metapsychosis. And part of the idea of the co-op is that I want people to come in, bring what they do, and use the space to incubate it and to develop it. And then the best of it, or what most resonates with the journal, we can publish it there. And other stuff that people may write their own books or do their own films. I mean, some stuff will happen within the co-op, other stuff not. But I want to create more of an incubator, like a field where people are just doing that, and it's higher definition, it's higher signal to noise ratio. The social media is great because there's 1 billion people on there, and so you're going to be able to communicate with pretty much anybody in the world. But I think we also need spaces that are more focused.
Yeah.
And so that's what Cosmos is about. The space has a purpose. The space is its own sort of bubble or sphere that differentiates from the chaos and the noise and the nonsense of the wider world, so that we can focus on going deeper and doing something that maybe is even like a seed, maybe like our collective interactions and the conversations that we have.
And so how is this creation of this space and this connection with all these people and reading this like, I have, avant-garde literature, right? This is not stuff you'll find in Walmart. How has that affected your life and work as a poet person?
Well, that's a good question, because it's been a lot of work just to put all this together. So I've been writing and just developing ideas throughout this process. And in the last 3 months, I've had to pause some of that stream of development to just get this website together and like get pushed towards a launch, like make it happen.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard because everybody, it's hard.
That's what we do,
Yeah, sure. And people have their own lives. They're very busy, and yeah, how many people are going to read a 1,000-page book? Like not them. It's I think many people would if they didn't feel so pressured by all the other demands of life.
Yeah, no kidding. Absolutely.
And I felt that way too, and I just had to make a decision that it was important.
Yeah. And
that may or may not be enough, depending on circumstances. But Cosmos is not just about reading 1,000-page books. Like we have other ways of engaging. It doesn't have to be, this totally time-intensive thing. You can listen to a podcast. It's 30 minutes, and reply to it. You can read a poem that takes 5 minutes, and just let it sit with you like that. Like part of what I've wanted to do from a design perspective is allow for different degrees of depth, so that those who can and want to go really, really, really deep can. There's a space for that, and those who want to more sort of float in and out, that's okay too. And really, we want to be fluid, and we want to allow enough flexibility that the creative currents can flow the way they need to. So that's all like design questions about how we really are conceiving the platform and what the interfaces are like or going to be like, because they're all still in development. And also the rules, like, because you get people together, it's a certain kind of game. It's a certain kind of world you're creating. Just like you go on Facebook and there are a certain set of rules around what you see and how you interact and how that whole universe works. Well, Cosmos is an alternative universe with a different set of rules. And in our universe, we're not here to profit from each other. Like, we're here to collaborate with each other, to support each other, to sponsor each other, right? Like we do want to create a sustainable economy for, that is as wide and as deep as possible, span and depth. And so the economics is an important part of the equation, because that's what allows me to continue working on it, and I hope many others.
Yeah, and people can just donate, right?
People can just donate, but we have.
Sometimes it must be just good to donate to poets, with all the other stuff, But my God, in our shuffle, in our political engagements, and our work and everything, sometimes we forget our poets, man. And that's what you're bringing
Throw
back.
us some money, come on.
Yeah, no, do, please. I know this guy. He's a wonderful person, and lovely dogs, and lovely kids, and lovely wife, and he's a real deal. Never,
Well,
nobody has ever said to Marco, he's so insincere. Like, what? Or he's so dumb, and none of that. Or he's so shallow, none of that. No, it's like, yeah, what you see is what you get here, folks. It's just amazing.
Well, if you can. If you got a few extra dollars burning a hole in your pocket, and you don't know how else to invest it.
You're ethnically, you're half Latin American, right? And I grew up in Latin America, and I grew up in cultures where poetry mattered. Poets were big people, always, and it was just like, there's something different going on down there. And of course, we had Whitman was a huge influence on me, and Thoreau. And we had our poets that really, really mattered. And when we lose connection with our poets, we lose connection with our depth. And when we lose connection with our depths, life sucks. Almost every pathology in the modern world, the postmodern world, the post-postmodern world, or America right now, is a lack of depth. We just don't go deep enough. The discussion doesn't take us to the place where we can really start connecting the dots in a way that really transforms. And
here's a connection point. Here's a connection point with the meditation, though, and with why I think, the technology of the self, or the technology of the spiritual technology, is important. And I think technology itself is something we need to look at critically. So I'm not just blindly advocating for or advertising for the use of any particular technology, but somehow we have to integrate with. We have to balance, because we're not getting outside of technology, and at the same time, I think that we need to relate to our technology as human beings with souls and with consciousness.
Yeah, well, somebody was using the phrase the post internet economy, and I okay, I hear that a lot. What does that mean? Well, it means the internet's a given. Okay, it's here. It's not, this brand new toy that we're all trying to figure out. Yeah, we got it. Maybe there's some new iterations down there, or maybe constantly, but it's a given. Therefore, how do we live? And connection, soul, depth, community, all of these things are becoming more and more important, because you can get so glutted with bullshit from the internet that how do we refine it into a tool that really helps us to go deep and discover the beauty that's in us and all around us.
Yeah, I think that's right. We have to bake it in. We have to code it in. We have to recreate our interfaces. We have to recreate our practices, the way that we use the technology, and the way that, this is all, this is not going to slow down. This is not going to get less complex. This is not going to, so I'm, as you are with the spiritual technology, part of what we're paying attention to in Cosmos is our own technology, and our technology of interaction, of communication, of conversation, of collaboration, and of communion. Because we're all spread out across the world, right? And it can be sometimes hard to find your tribe just in a local space. What we have now, this will be my pitch. We have a website at Cosmos.coop, COOP, and we just launched our beta membership program. So you could, if you want to support us, you can definitely donate. We'll take as much money as you want to give. We have some legal expenses to take care of to finalize aspects of the cooperative structure. We have technology expenses. I have not paid myself yet. So I've been doing a ton of work, thousands of hours of work.
You dear sweet.
No, it's okay.
No,
I'm doing it
because
it's awesome. Because I'm doing it because I love it. But I do need to ultimately pay myself for it.
Yeah,
Because
you bet.
otherwise I'm just going to fall apart, trying to make ends meet and get an organization like this going. But I trust that will come. And the first step for us has been to launch a beta membership program. And what you get with that is that you can start conversations in our forum. You can participate in our reading groups. You can submit work to Metapsychosis, and then you can also help. You can join a working group or a committee, because what we'll have is sort of a holacratic type of structure where different groups are working on different aspects of the organization, technology and particular projects, web development projects, etc. So the $2 is just, to me, just a it's just symbolic in a certain way. It's not a lot of money for most people, but it's there now. So you could sign up. We have a video which we may share in this, or you may have already shared in this talk. It's my sort of synthesis, my visionary, poetic, philosophical, like organizational synthesis of what the co-op is and how it works and why it exists.
And do you have email lists and you send out to people and this is what's going on and show up for this and we're presenting this or stuff like that?
We do, and you could you can sign up for that at Cosmos.coop, but you can also join our forum. And it's free and open to join the forum. The forum is at infiniteconversations.com. I wish I could draw a mind map for you because there's just like 4 or 5 websites and they're all interconnected. Yeah. And like in our development vision, they'll all be even more integrated over time. But we have a forum that anybody can join, and with a free account, you can reply to any topic that gets started. You can post your comment to a podcast or something you read on the journal or whatever else. And then if you want to take the next step and initiate things, that's where we put the paywall, and that's where the $2 comes in. Basically,
come on, people, give more than $2.
You can give more than $2.
Give $100.
You can, and there are options. You give 2, okay. 5, 7, 10, 15, 25, 50. So if you can afford more than $2, yeah, give more than $2. But if you just want to kind of dip your toe in the water and see what it's like, you give $2. You can give more later, and we'll be rolling more stuff out later, because what we really want to develop too are these like incubators and these infrastructures for really developing projects, right? So the books are community building because there are many different books. People have, a variety of interests. They can get together around a book and talk about it. But then if we want to take it to the next step and really collaborate, create something like write a book or produce a documentary or an art film or whatever it is, the space is being designed to allow that to happen and to even build in the economics and technology of collaboration. And so that's sort of the bigger vision of Cosmos as a cooperative.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Is there a poem of yours that you could quote us or you could read us to just kind of wrap this up and let us see into the heart and soul of this beautiful man, Marco Morelli?
I'd like to share some words from one of the books that we're gonna be reading. I'm working on an epic poem called I'll tell you about. I'm working on something, but it's not yet ready. I started it started it a couple of years ago. I made a lot of progress just before the election, and then I had to turn my attention to getting this website ready. So as soon as like this launch is sort of like underway and really happening, I'm going to return to that. Like that's really where my heart is that particular poem. It's called I Am the Singularity, and it's sort of like my howl or my wasteland.
Oh God, yeah, I love those poems. Are hugely important to me.
Yeah. So, but it's not done yet. And in lieu of that, and more as a sort of pitch for what we're doing, and maybe to persuade some people to sign up, I'd like to read the first page from this novel here. It's called Shantaram. It's by Gregory David Roberts, and we're going to be doing a reading group for this book in the coming weeks. And this is a novel. It's much easier to read than the philosophy. It's a story. It's told in a relatively linear way, but it's really beautifully told. And I'm going to give you a taste for it. And then I'm going to let you imagine just sitting with this book. It's somewhat long, it's like 900 pages, but we're going to take our time and giving yourself, you know, a couple nights a week to read it. And then what we'll do in the book club is we'll get together every week or two and just have a conversation like you and I are having, but in a slightly larger group, to share like our responses to the book, what affects us, what questions we have, and so forth. And we'll also have the online space for you know, people who want to do that. But this is page 1. And I have not read the whole book either. I've read probably 50 pages or so. I'm like, I want to read the whole book, and you'll see why. It took me a long time and most of the world to learn what I know about love and fate and the choices we make. But the heart of it came to me in an instant, while I was chained to a wall and being tortured. I realized, somehow, through the screaming in my mind, that even in that shackled, bloody helplessness, I was still free. Free to hate the men who were torturing me or to forgive them. It doesn't sound like much, I know, but in the flinch and bite of the chain, when it's all you've got, that freedom is a universe of possibility. And the choice you make between hating and forgiving can become the story of your life. In my case, it's a long story and a crowded one. I was a revolutionary who lost his ideals in heroin, a philosopher who lost his integrity in crime, and a poet who lost his soul in a maximum security prison. When I escaped from that prison, over the front wall, between 2 gun towers, I became my country's most wanted man. Luck ran with me and flew with me across the world to India, where I joined the Bombay Mafia. I worked as a gun runner, a smuggler, and a counterfeiter. I was chained on 3 continents, beaten, stabbed, and starved. I went to war. I ran into the enemy guns, and I survived, while other men around me died. They were better men than I am, most of them. Better men whose lives were crunched up in mistakes and thrown away by the wrong second of someone else's hate or love or indifference. And I buried them, too many of those men, and grieved their stories and their lives into my own. I mean, that's fucking good. I'm sorry, but that's good. So we're going to be starting that, and you can learn about that at Cosmos.coop. $2 a month, sign up, come read with us, stick around, and help us build this thing, because I think that we have the potential to create a space that is really generative, really sustaining, that really nourishes our souls, our own inner poets and artists and musicians, that gives us a space where we could sing and play the blues, and and then also think about it and talk about it and have some fun as well.
Yeah, and thanks for at a time when we need it more than ever, letting us know that literature and poetry and art matters, and without it, we're just not happy campers. We're just stuck in the shallow end of the pool, and it's not a good place to hang out for long periods. So thank you for holding up depth and creating this beautiful website, beautiful life.
Thank you.
Really important.
Thank you, John and Pam and Louie and Doug and your whole team for doing these talks and for having me.
Yeah. So anyway, love you, Marco. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right. Take care.
God bless.